Welcome back, everyone, to another Lure Lab episode here on the Serious Angler Network. I'm your host, the captain, Andrew Full, and we have a really cool episode here for you today. Jeff Gustafson took some time out of his busy schedule, getting ready to travel for a couple derbies within like a 4-week time period, and also the Bassmaster Classic champ. He's coming on. We're going to talk about the winning technique from the Classic, which is moping, or what a lot of people here in the States call damiki rigging. And it's going to be a really good one. We're going to dive into the ins and outs, how to do it, baits, color sizes. And we have talked about it on the Serious Angler Network before, so you can go back and watch that episode if you want as well. That was a really good one. But before we get him on here, I want to circle back to last week's episode where we had Mark Menendez on, and we were chatting about 2-inch crankbaits, deep diving ones, and where to effectively fish them and colors and help you put more bass in the boat. And that is our total objective here, is to help everyone put more bass in the boat or on the bank or in the kayak. But before I keep rambling here, let's get Jeff on and congratulate him. What's up, man? Congrats. I just had to ask, did you, going into practice, did you think that the smallmouth bite was going to materialize and stay all 3 days?
Here's the thing. When I going to Knoxville for practice, I pretty much was committed to smallmouth fishing. And, it's the Classic. If it had been a regular elite event, I probably would have maybe been more conservative. But, it's cliche to say, oh, I'm going to go fish to win. It's the Classic, but this time I just got to experience the potential of the smallmouth bite the last time when we were there in 2021. And I was going there pretty committed to doing that. And the first couple days, there was fish on the same stuff that I caught them at last time, but then it became apparent between all the local pressure and then our guys, that stuff was getting blasted, and it was like no one's winning the tournament here. Hopefully I can take a couple fish out of that canal, but I had to look for new stuff. And I, luckily I found two big schools that just kind of hung on. If the tournament had been a few days later, they would have been gone, and it probably wouldn't have happened. And then the other side of that, if it would have been a few days earlier, I think I would have crushed them. Yeah. When I found them the Sunday before, there was a lot of fish, and they were biting and they were big. And even when I pulled up there the first day of the tournament, it went pretty good. I caught them pretty quick, but I could even tell then that there wasn't as many there as there was when I found it. But yeah, it all worked out barely. The last day was a real struggle for everybody that watched, but I had a plan, and often when you go to these tournaments, whatever your preconceived notion is doesn't often pan out, but luckily this time it did.
Awesome. We're so happy for you over here, and I'm sure you've probably heard that 1,000 times, but I don't know if there was somebody bigger rooting for you, and I know that's cliche to say than probably Bailey and myself. So,
I appreciate it. We've kind of been knowing each other for a long time, and we share the northern support for each other.
Yes, you're just across the border, which is okay, I guess.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you still have some snow on the ground, and we are.
We do. That's why it looks so bright out my windows, but hopefully that's not annoying everybody. But yeah, we do have snow on the ground. It's melting, and we're getting some nice weather now. But I'm out of here in a couple days. We got 3 elite events coming up in about a 4-week stretch. So when I get back, everything should be melted. And, that's why I live up here. Our summers are beautiful, and sort of no place that I'd rather be, but it's nice getting to get out of here in the winter and go be in the boat down south.
Now, before we do completely get started here, I do have one more question for you, and it's about Lake of the Woods. Right?
Yeah.
Since you won the Classic, do you think that would give any sway power to Bass to maybe bring an event to your home lake at Lake of the Woods?
I wish. I hope it would be amazing. An amazing body of water to have an elite event at, just because it's so big, and there's a lot of different ways you could catch fish. Fishing's really good. We don't have the giants like in the Great Lakes, but you could come up here for the whole week in the summer and throw a top water the whole time and just catch all the bass you wanted.
Sign me up for that.
Yeah, but the reality is, just with like crossing the border, there's a lot of red tape stuff. So I don't know that it'll ever happen. Maybe. The American side of Rainy Lake, which is just south of us, we actually share Lake of the Woods with Minnesota too, but it would be a little tougher there, I think, just with you're kind of on the ocean on that south end of Lake of the Woods, and not the same as the beautiful northern part of it. But the American side of Rainy Lake, I mean, would be a pretty good place to have an event, and I'd welcome that just as much. But you never know.
It could be an infrastructure issue too, like not enough places to house visitors and guests. But we'll digress here, kind of get into the topic of the show. And so for everyone who is new to bass fishing, right, they might not know what moping or damiki rig is. So can you dive into that a little bit here for our viewers and kind of discuss what it is, and then we'll kind of keep going along?
Yeah. So if you watched, you kind of saw I used the Z-Man jerk shad on a jig head, and that was how I caught all my fish in 2021 and again this time around. It's a bait technique that I've grown up, doing it for like 20 years. So I probably take for granted a lot of the little nuances to it and things that I do, but a couple of general rules. So I'm going to rig up a bait, and then I'll just sort of talk about how I'm sort of fishing it and everything. So the jig head I'm using it's made by a friend of mine. He's been making them for over 10 years, but called the Smeltinator jig head. So you can see, lifelike head design, nice eyes, and a good collar. One of the most important things, you want a 90-degree jig head for this, and you want your knot coming off vertical like that, 90 degrees from the hook. And that's going to allow the bait to sit horizontal and natural in the water. And if you go back and watch the live show, I mean, I'm constantly 100 times a day making sure that knot is straight off of the eye like that. And then so that's one of the baits. The Elastec stuff, it's far superior for this technique to regular plastic. And just because it's buoyant, this is the stretchy Z-Man plastic, and it's buoyant, so that just also helps it sit natural in the water. Does take some practice, because you want the bait to be on your jig perfectly straight. If it's not on there straight, it's going to twirl, not look natural, twist your line, no good. So you want to take some time, get the bait on there nice and straight. One of the things, so when you get to that point, this is one of the tricks with any, like the Ned rig baits, any of these Elastec baits you put on a jig head, I like to actually take it and just sort of snap it. You see what I did there? You just sort of snap it, and look at how perfect that goes on. And I mean, I do a lot of these, so I'm, I get to do
You're
it all
proficient
at it. But so there it is. That's nice and straight, perfect on there. And then the other thing that's sort of mandatory, and I don't have any here. I don't have my boat with me right now, but I dab a super glue on the collar, and I use the Loctite stuff. It comes in that gray and blue can, just because it lasts a little bit longer, and it it allows you to just squeeze a drop out, which is all you need. Push that on there with some glue, and you're good to go. If you don't glue it, the bait just, every time you check set or get a bite, your bait's going to get pulled down. And a lot of times, what would happen, and this happened in the tournament, you'd get some of these fish would come and hit the bait, and I think they almost hit it with their mouth closed. But I mean, I feel that bump, and I'm going like this. But if you don't get one, you want to be able to like drop that bait back down to them, and another one will usually come and eat it. So, but that's the bait. And I mixed up, they make a 3.75 streaks, a little bit smaller one. In the canal, I felt like the smaller bait, a little more finesse was better. And then I used the 5-inch jerk shot a lot too. In practice, they bit the 5-inch one fine. I just felt like in the tournament, the 4 was just kind of the most, the best overall option for me. Comes to the rods and reels. I mean, I'm pretty spoiled. I'm using an NRX Plus G Loomis, a 7.3. So it's an 872, kind of a 7.3 medium action. You want, a sensitive rod to be able to feel those light bites. Sometimes they just freight train it. But something that's not too stiff, because a lot of times the fish are right under the boat, or I'll sometimes get them 10 feet under the boat, and then when you don't want to shock your line or break your line, so you want a soft tip on there. Shimano Stella reel, 10-pound Power Pro, and a 10-pound fluorocarbon leader. You can kind of see my knot there, FG knot. If you aren't tying an FG knot, spend the time tonight, watch a couple YouTube videos and practice. It's 100%, almost like a life changer for me once I learned how to do it. I mean, I wasn't breaking fish off necessarily, but I tied a uni to uni and a blood knot for years, like marginal knots. And if you're using a tube or a Ned rig or something, like I would get snagged, and half the time my leader knot would break, and you'd have to put a whole new leader on. With that FG knot, never happens. I could count on one hand the number of times I've broken it. And then the other thing, with most of the other leader knots, you got to keep your line sizes sort of the same, like 8-pound to 8-pound, 10-pound to 10-pound. With an FG knot, if I wanted, I can still use the 10-pound braid, which is really strong, but I could tie a 15 or 17-pound leader on there if I'm going to Santee Cooper and I want to whip a wacky rig around and there's giants. I mean, it's even fishing around docks. Yeah, it's a special knot. So the fluorocarbon, Shimano has some new fluorocarbon coming out this summer, and I've got some earlier in the year. It's like their rods and reels. I mean, it's high quality, good stuff, and yeah, that was the setup.
So I do have a rod question for you. Why 7'3"? Because a lot of times, like when you think about damiki or moping, right? Like it's straight up and down, but does the 7'3" allow you to tight line the bait a little bit better? So like when you cast it out 40, 50 feet from the boat and bring it down, is it more of a control thing than rather just being straight up and down vertical?
Yeah, I mean, you could use a 7-footer would be fine as well. But this particular rod is just my favorite kind of do everything spinning rod. I mean, it's just a really good action, but I use it for tubes, for wacky rigs, Nico rigs, shaky heads, just kind of a do everything spinning rod. But yeah, the 7.3, it's a good length. I mean, I can, it's not getting too far out there to where it's cumbersome, but I can, keep my bait in the cone of my transducer up there and be able to see it all the time, and then still have enough length in it to where I'm not, I got some good absorption and just ability to like fight the fish.
Absolutely. So let's fast forward a little bit. Now we already mentioned the bait that you're using. Now, can you dive into like if you use different jig head colors and then maybe even some colors of the bait itself, the plastic itself?
Yeah. So, I mean, this particular jig comes in a, 5 or 6 different colors. They're all kind of natural patterns. And then the Z-Man baits, I mean, that one's smoky shad. That's one of my favorites. Smelt, shiner. They've got one called Disco Cisco. That's a new one. It's got a little bit of blue and chartreuse in it, but I'm always using like natural pearl base colors, and that's sort of just the way to go. Another one sec here. I got another one to show you. This is another jig that Northland makes. Also a good, similar minnow head design. Natural looking. But that's another one too. That's a good jig. But yeah, I mean, as far as like, it's pretty much like finding the fish and the things that you do with your bait generally are more important than like if you find them and they haven't been fished hard or whatever, they're pretty easy to catch generally, and that's how these ones were. But once I started fishing them a little bit, and who knows, like if other people were fishing them after I left, I mean, it got a lot harder on the last day for some reason. But a couple things, like the number one rule with fishing these baits and doing this technique, like I've always, before we had forward facing sonar, it was always about getting on top of the fish and sort of ice fishing. I mean, watching your bait on the 2D. And now with forward sonar, we're able to like see the rocks or see the fish out in front of us. And I'm doing a lot more like pitching it out there a half cast and swimming it back over top of these fish. And then they'll just shoot up and eat it. Kind of like what you do with a small swim bait. It's just a little different look. And
now I do have a question before you go forward. When you cast it out and you reel it back, is it just a steady retrieve because you can see it on forward and you're just kind of bringing it in, or are you giving it like little twitches every once in a while to make it like almost flutter and a hover?
Mostly you're just kind of like letting it do a pendulum, so it takes a little practice, I guess. Like I just don't even think about this, but just like talking to Carl after I'm, trying to tell him how I'm doing it and take for granted that some of it I just don't even think about, but it's a lot of pendulum and just get the right sort of cadence. And the forward sonar allows you to watch your bait, see what's happening, see when a fish is coming up to check it out. If I see a fish on me and, they're thinking about it a little bit, I will there's no like jigging to make the bait do this. It's just like make it quiver a little bit. And that's sort of what I try to do with my rod a little bit.
It probably takes a lot of art in the technique to get it to stay in the same part of the water column while sitting there quivering it on the line, because when the line's taut, it'll jump too much. So there's got to be like a perfect art to it.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I use a 3/8 jig, so it's a fairly heavy jig, but I want it to be able to get down pretty quick and not be like where I'm waiting for it all the time, But at the same time, like I felt like I did tie a lighter jig on that Sunday of the Classic because it was flat, calm, and it just seemed like the fish were lazy. But because a few times with that 3/8, I was getting them to come up to it, and then I felt like it was just going too fast, and I'd run out of room at the boat, and then they did not like the boat being on top of them by like late in the tournament. And, the first day it didn't matter. I got a group of them. I think I got the first one, sort of pulled them to the boat. And then I was just dropping it down and plucking them right under the boat. It was awesome.
Yeah. When smallmouth want to eat, they're fun, but when they don't want to eat, I hate them so much.
Yeah. They can be ignorant. And that's how these things got by the end of the tournament for sure.
Another question on the jerk shads. I know they come scented. Do they also come unscented? And when would you use one or the other?
So all of the 4 and 5 inch jerk shads come scented, and they have the Procure scent on them. So it's kind of like a gel that you can kind of see in the package, the colored stuff. It stays on there pretty good. I mean, I'm not a huge scent guy, but I've used these long enough to know that bass like these things. And so like my routine, like when you glue one of these baits on, I mean, I would use it all day unless I scuffed a hook point on a rock or something. I didn't have to change my bait throughout the day, but every morning I'd rig up 5 or 6 new ones, put new baits on my rod just so I had the fresh scent. The smaller bait, so the 3.75 streaks, if you're getting around fish that are like a little bit more pressured, that's a smaller profile bait, and those ones are not scented. But in the canal, that was the one that I kind of went with just because it was a little bit smaller and just a little bit more finesse. That's a really good. That's a bait that a lot of guys are drop shotting too.
Yeah.
Now.
It reminds me a lot of like the Baby Z2.
Yeah, that's the same bait as this. Those ones might be made by a different company.
I'm sure.
Yeah, same bait as this one. So
yeah,
but yeah, really good drop shot bait.
Perfect. Now, so with the 90-degree angle head and the jig head, right? Like, what is the preferred hook if you have one in there? Like, do you want like a super thin wired hook in there, or do you want more of like a thicker gauge? Because I know every company makes a different wire gauge on their hook. So if you had to custom pour one like your buddy does, is it like a Gami 604? Is it like an Owner 53 13 style? Do you know the hook in that?
Yeah, I know for sure. So the Smeltonator comes with the 604 Gami. That's my favorite hook. It's sort of the 2X, a little bit heavier gauge. We're not allowed to use nets. So this hook's mandatory for tournament fishing for me just because I can boat flip a good sized fish on it. I'm not going to open it up with 10-pound test. And that's my favorite hook kind of. but that's the 604. The Northland one, the Mimic Minnow jig, it has a Gamakatsu hook, but it's the lighter wire version. And I mean, for some situations, if you're using a lighter line, more finesse, I mean, that's fine. That's a good hook too. It's razor sharp. You just, you can't pull quite as hard on that one as you can with the 604. So that's sort of the difference. And I'll use both of them, but yeah, that one's a little bit lighter wire. But yeah, if you're into more finesse, if we could use nets, and it wouldn't be a big deal. But I mean, I just hate having those things come up and be all hot, going nuts. I kind of bring them in faster than a lot of people. But that's just, when I hook them, I just want them in the boat, and you lose the odd one. The very first one I hooked on the first morning, I tried to boat flip it, and it was on that smaller bait. These are 2/0 hooks in these jigs, but it had a 1/0 hook in it, and kind of a small hook to boat flip a big fish on, and I pulled it out. So I was mad at myself for that one, but that was the only fish I really lost, like in battle in the tournament.
Yeah, it's good not to let those fish losses rattle you too. So
yeah,
thank goodness you knew that there were more smallmouth to be had.
Yeah. Well, at the time I was like, you just, at the start of the tournament, you didn't want to mess around. I mean, and it's going to be hard to get that limit of 18-inch fish. That was the sort of the challenge, and probably was a deterrent for some of the other guys to really go all in on smallmouth fishing. But yeah, it worked out. Awesome.
So one last question. Well, we have two questions, but this will be the last one before the final question of the show. So we know moping catches smallmouth, but it also will catch largemouth and spots as well. So how do you break down a lake quickly in order to effectively target bass with the moping technique?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously it's a deeper water program. I mean, and the fish got to be kind of looking for bait, but if like even in the summertime, it's up here, it's really good later in the summer and the fall when our fish kind of get out deeper. And I know like some of the New York lakes, this works really good. I've done well with this at Champlain and some of the other ones, but deeper water, and they got to be looking for bait. So last year, I'm not kidding you, over half of our tournaments last year, I weighed in fish on that setup, like at Pickwick, Lake Fork. Where else did we go? Like obviously Oahe. There was one other largemouth lake last year, but I mean I caught a Hartwell. This was kind of my plan in the Classic last year, and I ended up catching a lot of fish and just didn't get big ones for some reason. It was kind of disappointing, but yeah, it's a deadly weapon for me. But if I can find fish offshore in deeper water, like that increases my chances a lot compared to if I got to go beat the bank with these guys. It's harder for me. You got to kind of be able to do it all for sure. But like if I can do this out deeper and offshore and stuff, like I'm gonna have a good chance to do well in these events. So it's just something that I always keep honest and look for. Potentially at Lake Murray, it's a herring lake. I've never really fished it before, so we'll see where they're at. I know there's probably going to be a lot of fish on the bank still. Santee, there'll probably be some fish on the bank there, but for sure there'll be some fish starting to pull out. So I'm going to probably push that program pretty hard when we go there.
Why not?
Lay Lake, I know there'll be some fish off the bank there. Sabine River, we're bank beaten, I think. And then we got the 3 smallmouth tournaments in the summer, and this is going to be part of my arsenal there at all of those events for sure. But it's a technique, and I mean, however we all love to fish. I mean, we all have a certain technique or way of fishing that we're good at and have ultimate confidence in, and that's for me. This is it. I mean, it's just something that I feel like maybe I have a leg up on the rest of the competition that I'm fishing against. And these guys are the best in the world. I mean, I have so much respect for all these guys. And, but that's, just something that I've got a little bit more experience with. And up here where I live, I mean, it's not only for bass, but I've caught hundreds of walleyes on that, lake trout, pike will bite it. I mean, I've caught a lot of fish doing that. And I can't believe it. I got this great opportunity at the Bassmaster Classic to bust that out and for it to be my program.
My apologies. I know I said there was only 2 questions left, but I did think of another one. I just want to add it in here real fast if you don't mind. But what is the ideal water temperatures? Because I know you'll use it in the summertime as well. So like, let's say pre-spawn and then in summertime, what are like the ideal temperature swings that you look for in order to focus on catching fish on this technique?
You know what? To be honest with you, other than around like the pre-spawn, you could take the water temperature off my boat the whole rest of the year. I could care less what the water temperature is. I've been to Sturgeon Bay on Lake Michigan pre-spawn, and you better be wherever it's 2 or 3 degrees warmer, like where the wind's blowing in and that sort of thing. But for this, I don't think the water temperature is as important as just, we have electronics, and the fish, these smallmouths especially, will show themselves. But they just have to be in that kind of deeper water where they're, and you hope they're schooled up but where they're in a little bit deeper water and they're looking up, looking for bait fish. That's where it, so, obviously like at Pickwick last year, we were there in June, fish were out on the main river ledges, and it was just something I don't think they'd seen before. So it put some fish in the boat for me. That was like 80 something degree water. Up north here, we'll catch them into November when it gets into the 30s with, doing this. But, and all probably primo, most places for like northern anglers, in that 50 degree range. There's still some fish out in pre-spawn. And then, later in the season, when we get in that 60, 50 range, there's going to be some fish out. And that's when you can really do some damage with these things.
Awesome. So, Jeff, last question here, and it's the juice of the show, and it's been customized for us by Do It Molds. So, what is one piece of advice that you would give someone who has never moped or fished a damiki rig before?
So a couple things. Yeah. Trust your electronics. They don't lie. And practice being able to see your bait. So if it's on forward sonar, find that exact line, get good at putting your bait into the cone where you can watch it. And you don't, when I won the 2021 event there, it was all with 2D sonar. Find that sweet spot under your trolling motor where you can watch your bait. And that's going to, teach you where it is in the water column. And after a while, that becomes second nature. And then it also shows you when fish are coming to check out your bait. And like I say, sometimes they just come and blast it. Sometimes you got to play cat and mouse with them a little bit, but and just always keep the bait above the fish. It's tempting. Sometimes you see them down there to just go and drop the bait right in their face, but always keep it above them. If you can make them look up, swim up, work forward a little bit, that seems to be the number one way to trigger bites.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. I want to say congrats again. Safe travels. You have a lot of road time coming ahead, and go catch them up and maybe put another blue trophy in. And, we'll be rooting for you over here on the network side of things. So, yeah, go catch them again, buddy.
Okay, boys. Well, I appreciate it and appreciate all the support all the time. And I can't wait to get out to your neck of the woods here later in the year and catch some giant smallmouths. But have a good season, too.
Thanks, dude. You guys have 2 tournaments in New York, right? I believe.
We're going to St. Clair in July, and then we got at the end of August we've got Champlain and Lake Ontario. So
yeah, beautiful.
That's as good as it gets for anyone that loves smallmouth fish in those 2 places. I'm excited.
Absolutely. So, all right, buddy. Well, we'll chat soon, and safe travels.
Yeah, take care.
Bye now. All right, everyone. Well, we hope you enjoyed the show today here on the Lure Lab. We had Jeff Gussie on and talking about moping and damiki rigging. And, he won the Bassmaster Classic on it 2 times in a row in Knoxville, catching giant smallmouth, doing things that other people didn't want to target for the full days. I'm sure anglers were like, I want to catch some smallmouth for all 3 days, but it's a hard thing to do when you have a minimum size limit of 18 inches. Even up north, sometimes it's really tough to catch an 18-inch smallmouth. And we here couldn't be any more excited for Gussie in pulling off that win, even though he gave everyone a little bit of a heartache on the final day there. But he got it done. But if you're on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment down below on your moping or damiki rig setup if you've ever used it or you want to try it. let us know. If you're on MP3, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, please leave a review. It allows us to be seen to more bass fishing heads like you and I, and we cannot thank you more for the support that everyone has given this. And just real fast, before we do end this out, head on over to the Serious Network Instagram page, hit the link tree. We do have an apparel shop up. Get yourself some cool swag like this brown fin tuna hoodie I have here. Super comfortable. We have options for the Lure Lab, Serious Angler Network, and Business from the Bass Boat. So head over there, help support the show, grab some awesome merch, and we will see you guys next time.